everyone. Hi. My name is Mary Beth Mussey, and I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of the Center for Law of Technology and the Arts and the Journal of Law, Technology and the Internet to the Arthur W. Fiske Memorial Lecture, From Product to Service, the Digitization of Culture. I'd like to also thank all the speakers for coming in and volunteering their time today. I know some of them had to come from quite far away. One even had to leave really warm Florida to come to Cleveland and be in this cold weather. I'd also like to thank Craig Nard and the Arthur W. Fiske Endowment for their contribution in making this symposium possible. We will begin this morning by hearing from Mark Avsec. Mark Avsec is a partner and vice chair of the Innovations, Information Technology, and Intellectual Property Group at Benesch Law. He also is a teacher at an adjunct professor at Case. He teaches the law of the music industry. Mark has been a fundamental component in bringing this lecture together, from coming up with a topic to reaching out to all of these wonderful speakers. We really couldn't have done it without him. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Mark Avsec.
So thanks a lot, and we're going to begin today. First, I personally want to thank the speakers who came in, who are all colleagues, friends of mine, and they did come in from, they're all very busy people and really high quality panels. So I do teach, and I said, I'm not going to do a PowerPoint. We're not going to do that. No PowerPoints today. I don't know the last time we went to a seminar, no PowerPoints. We'll have a couple of illustrations here. I'm curious, are there, who here are students? Okay, so I guess I would ask the students, and I heard a colleague and friend, Peter Manel, who teaches at UCal Berkeley. He recently gave the Brace lecture on copyright law. And he had asked a question, and he had explored this topic in his papers, which was, what do you all think of copyright law now? What's your opinion of copyright law? Quite honestly, would you share something? Somebody share with me. Do you understand the question? Or, the question is, when I was a kid, right? It seemed to me that the copyright ecosystem was a pretty good ecosystem. It fostered culture. It promoted the creation of music and books and films that I enjoyed. And it seemed like it was working pretty good. But it has seemed in these last several years that if you talk to young people, maybe younger than yourself, but you were younger than yourself when all this file sharing was going on, and still is, that, that the copyright law is kind of bad. It's suing customers. It's not good. And, that's troubling because, we still need to incent authors and inventors to create worthy products and works for our culture to make our culture better. And true, people will still write songs because they're in love with a woman, or because they want to be famous, or because for a number of reasons. But we still need an ecosystem that fosters a high quality production of works if we're going to continue to have a robust culture. And then beyond that, intellectual property law and monetizing certain forms of culture are very fundamental to our democracy. And I'm talking about libraries and newspapers. And what we have with digitization now is a certain disruption and a certain opportunity, threats and opportunities. And certain industries have responded well to these opportunities, and certain industries have not. And are challenged with it and continue to be challenged with it. And I think you're all aware of it. And this seminar is really going to explore on just a very high level some of the challenges and opportunities, both legal and business-wise, that digitization has created in the music space, in the e-book, audiobook, newspaper space, in the social expression industry, and I think it's highly interesting. Now, there's two kinds of areas of copyright law I find interesting in these last few years. One has to do with this sort of collaborative art or transformative art. there was an article just in, I mean, you can prepare for this kind of seminar on a daily basis because every day there's something that I get from either some blogger or I read the New York Times that's just highly relevant, and you probably see it too. And I saw this in Sunday's New York Times. Photographers band together to protect work in fair use cases. And really this was, the impetus for this was the Prince case. He took a work by an artist, Carew, and transformed it a bit. That's a word, you know, he would like to embrace. He's altered it. And the issue was it a fair use? And I won't go through the deep fair use analysis here, but we're in a culture now, again, when I was a boy, 13, 14 years old, I used works of others. I participated in my culture very actively. I was a musician, I wrote songs, I made these amateur films, and when I made these amateur films, I would use like works. I remember I made a film and it was like a neighborhood, so I used Our House by Crosby, Stills and Nash in it, and I used 2 or 3 other musical things, and I didn't get licenses, you know, and nobody was beating down my door, nobody was gonna sue me, and it was rather primitive because I had a Super 8 film and I had to sync up the soundtrack with a tape recorder, and, you know, I showed it to my class, and, you know, that was all fine. But now with digital, you know, there's no syncing up anymore. I mean, there's some really high quality mashing up. Now, many of you have seen this one. So let's take a look at this. This is rather old, and then we'll talk about this just for a second.
Stand by. 1 to the number in front of the Hello, 3, coming to. 3, coming to. 3.
We are on 3.
What?
We are on 3.
Oh, yes. You do.
Goddamn your manhole, crack the can open again. Who you gonna find open in hand with no pen? Just draw inspiration. Who you gonna see you can't replace him with cheap imitation? For this generation, I'm encore. Do you want more? Get roll with the Brooklyn boys. So for one last time, I need y'all to call. Now look what you made me do, look what I made for you. Knew if I paid my dues, how will they pay you? When you first come in the game, they try to play you. Look, I owe you the smithereens. Got something to take up for your team. And I need you to remember one thing. I came, I saw, I conquered. Record sound, sold out concert. So motherfucker, if you want this encore, I need you to scream till your lungs are sore. Hold up, hold up. Are y'all not what? Are y'all not hip-hop? Hold up, hold up. And see that love.
All right, so that's from like 2004. It's rather old. It's a mashup. Glenn Gamboa is a music critic with Newsday. Glenn, could you tell us? And I guess you'll have to speak up. Can you tell us what this was all about? I know you're aware of it.
Yeah, it came up
Danger Mouse, the DJ, came up with the idea that you could put together Jay-Z's Black Album and the Beatles' White Album and mash them together into something new. And he did it just because he thought it was a cool idea and wanted to try it. And at that point, he was kind of an up-and-coming producer, but this went viral, and it pretty much set him on his career. He's started bands with Gnarls Barkley. He had a big hit with them. He actually produced the biggest hit from Akron's Black Keys a few years ago that won them the Grammy. And he just put out an album that debuted in the top 5 with Broken Bells last month. Mm-hmm. So it set up his career.
But none of this was actually licensed.
No.
Right. And it was actually, it is illegal, technically. Nobody's really doing anything about, well, it is illegal. There's sort of an implicit permission at this point, or a license, because it's, you know, EMI did complain initially and sent cease and desist letters out. And there was something called Gray Tuesday. This is called the Gray Album because, I mean, you want to explain how Jay-Z did it? Do you recall how, or do you know how he did it? He put out like this a cappella.
Right. He put out all his vocals a cappella, or his raps a cappella.
So he took one of his albums, the Black Album, and put it out a cappella. So there was no music at all, only his rapping on it. You can still buy it, by the way. I've got a copy. And so Danger Mouse very cleverly said, well, you got the Beatles' White Album, okay, and you got Jay-Z's Black Album. I'll make the Gray Album. And so he took the Beatles' music and mashed it up with Danger Mouse. It's very creative stuff, and it is illegal, all right? Let's look at something else. This is a guy, Greg Gillis. I'll tell you, he is from Case. He went, not law school, but I think he's a bioengineer. He was doing well as an engineer, but he had a little side passion, which was making mashups of music. He's now known as Girl Talk. He's actually sampled a couple of my tunes. I don't really care. But he actually, to set the stage for this, in like a 4-minute song, Girl Talk, which is Greg Gillis, he will probably infringe maybe 200 copyrights, because what he'll do is he'll take a sound recording and the musical composition from, say, Queen's We Will Rock You. He'll use like 5 seconds, he'll overlay it with a Beatles thing, he'll overlay it with something else. Creates this sort of frenetic 4-minute sort of mashup. And now he gives away his albums on a label called Illegal Art. None of this stuff has been licensed. He has not been sued yet. And he actually makes a lot of money from public performances now. The guy's become very, very huge. He's playing Bonnaroo and Coachella, and he played House of Blues downtown. I think he sold it out in about 5 minutes. And I mean, he's making a lot of money now. He quit. He's not an engineer anymore. So let's, just a little clip. Now with him is Mary Beth Peters, who is the former registrar of copyrights with the Copyright Office. And there's a gentleman with Mary Beth who's showing Mary Beth, because he's making a documentary film about mashups. And he's showing Mary Beth what Greg is doing. And Greg's girlfriend's sort of sleeping on the bed in the background, in case you wonder what she's all about. This is only a couple of minutes, and it's kind of interesting. Hopefully the sound is a little better.
So I'll just grab any one of those, paste that into a new window. Elvis Costello.
Hey Brian, perhaps we could, oh, there we go.
So
let's try
I just highlight the first kind of percussion hit.
It's all
so
good.
If I put 0.25 seconds of it there, and then paste 0.12, half of that, and paste to 0.25 seconds again. So this is 1 second now, and this should be on a rhythm. Put in 0.12.
Need more volume.
So I'll just grab any one of those.
Can we get more
paste
volume?
that into a new window.
Really?
Elvis Costello radio.
So if I just highlight the first kind of percussion hit.
So if I put 0.25 seconds of it there, and then paste 0.125 seconds of it, which is half of that, and paste to 0.25 seconds again. So this is 1 second now, and this should be on a rhythm. Put in 0.125 seconds of silence. Put it twice, so it's 0.25 seconds of silence. And paste the 0.25 seconds again.
Oh my God.
Paste the 0.125 seconds.
This is a lot of copyright infringement.
So this
Well,
is 1
well,
second
no, I'm
now.
just amazed at what he's
On a
doing.
rhythm. So that pretty much sounds nothing like that original song, and I would say that's roughly the equivalent of, you know, taking a familiar Beatles melody on your guitar and rearranging the notes and putting a new guitar pedal sound on it and calling it your own song.
So, I don't know if you heard the last part, but Greg was saying that he thinks he's really creating something new because he thought it was just like taking a Beatles song, rearranging it. You know, if you're a composer, being inspired by a Beatles song, rearranging it, and then writing another song. So, whether that is true or not, you know, is really will be the subject of many legal briefs if he's ever sued, because copyright infringement is actual copying of copyright protected expression resulting in substantial similarity, and there's no question that Greg is copying, and this is copyright protected expression, I believe. I mean, there could be an argument that just a little something maybe is not, but I would contend it probably is, resulting in substantial similarity. You know, then the issue will be, is there really substantial similarity? But honestly, he's just knocking off. If he's taking an exact tune, it probably is substantially similar. And in the Sixth Circuit, where we are, you know, it is an infringement of a sound recording, even if you cannot recognize that sound recording as it's been embodied in a new work. And the court has its reasons for that, mainly the Copyright Act 17 U.S.C. 114, which provides that the only way you can infringe a sound recording is by physically taking it. Well, it actually doesn't say that, but it can be interpreted to mean that. So it's really quite interesting. So Greg, like Prince, the Prince Carreyrou case, and many of the other transformative cases would have to argue that what he's doing is a fair use. And a fair use is there's 4 factors. And that is beyond the scope of this seminar, even though I love the topic. It's beyond the scope of the seminar. So that's one way that digitization is changing our world. You know, the 20th century was about really a lot of passive consumption. I mean, the music industry has been around ever since cave people were banging on drums, okay? And people enjoy music. They used it to celebrate life's great events, to have fun, you know, for many reasons. 20th century, music became about selling pieces of plastic to people, whether it was 78 records or cassettes or 8-track tapes or whatever. And it's been said sometimes that people began to lose their voices in the 20th century. They weren't participating in culture as much. For example, the 19th century, the music industry was furniture business. It was pianos. And if you wanted to participate in the music industry or enjoy music, you sang around the piano. It might be argued that people are finding their voices again. They're beginning to participate in culture again. However, we're creating a climate now, or there is a climate, where what they're doing is illegal. And so we're making pirates or scofflaws out of our young people who are, in many cases, just innocently participating in culture. And is there something wrong with a Copyright Act that, you know, would lead to that conclusion? And should there be some reasonable changes to the Copyright Act? I want to introduce our panelists a little bit. First, I'll start with Patty Motta, who's a senior IP counsel at American Greetings Corporation, iconic company we all know and love. And Patty, you know, what strikes me about American Greetings is that Kodak, for example, we all know Kodak, very good trademark, very distinctive. But Kodak, it seems to me, thought it was in the film business, okay? And of course, we've had digital cameras now, and Kodak's primary business now, to my knowledge, is, you know, they enforce a lot of patents. But their primary business is no longer that relevant because we don't need to take pictures on film anymore. What were the challenges for American Greetings as it launched into the digital business? And to the point we've been discussing, has your life become more complicated with licensing in media-rich cards, e-cards, as opposed to just your former paper products only?
Okay, lot of questions. So, I think fundamentally for American Greetings, what's maybe a little bit different than some of the other folks on the panel is that, people still want to connect, right? So they want to connect in meaningful ways across a multitude of platforms in a variety of different ways. So we have that going for us in the digital culture. And we've always had an interactive business. So we've been engaged on the interactive side since the time of the Amazons of the world and creating digital content for our consumers. The challenge for us, though, is that it's the new generation. It's the new consumers and how we get that Gen Y consumer to want to buy paper greeting card. And that we found a few years ago that wasn't where they were going to find our products. They were using social media, social networking, blogging to connect. But what consumers still crave, or what we found, is that they still crave artistry. They still crave stories and words and content. And so that's what we can provide them. And the way we did this was an experiment in a product solution several years ago called Just Wink. It was aimed at the Gen Y consumer, and it took the paper card to a digital platform. We utilized a QR code on the back of the cards. We marketed in a different way. We worked with our product developers in a different way. And so we were trying to build that nexus or bridge between the paper greeting card space, where we still know there are heavy users and heavy connectors, but she looks probably a lot like me or my mother, and she doesn't look like the generation of our youth today and how they connect. But they still want to connect in meaningful ways. So, but in my world, I see a lot more volume of a bunch of different things across a bunch of different platforms that makes my day crazy.
Is it easy to is it easy to license music and third-party content for use in your cards?
It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's made easy because we pay a company a lot of money to help
Right.
us do it, and who has connections and knows the industry really well.
Do you think it would be easy for Greg Gillis to license all his music for his mashups?
No.
Yeah. I don't think anybody would really talk to him.
And the way copyright law is structured, right, it's a bundle of rights, it's a pie.
Right.
And everybody wants their slice of the pie now. Before, American Greetings used to buy content and we'd own it. We'd buy it outright.
Right.
Now we buy a slice, or we license a slice for a specific use for a specific period of time for a specific part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a lot more complicated than it used to be.
So if I suggested to you, and I think it's a reasonable suggestion, that Greg maybe uses 100 copyrights in one 3-minute piece, and I'm sure that's easily true, how much do you think he would have to pay in licensing fees?
For what use?
For what you just saw, for like a 3-minute pop tune?
Honestly, I have no idea.
I could suggest to you, because I do this too, and I use a person out in LA to do my licensing. Go ahead.
It would be hundreds of thousands.
It would. It would be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and he could never do it, and nobody really would talk to him unless they knew he'd pay up $10,000 for 5 seconds of something. So Glenn, I believe Newsday was the first magazine to really have a paywall for subscription online. I guess I would ask you, and Professor Koo is going to, query your panel and drill down on a lot of these areas. But do you ever foresee a time when the online revenue will be sufficient to support the great reporting that your magazine does, or that any magazine does?
Well, we certainly hope so. I mean, online revenue in terms of subscribers and advertising, which is much less online than it is in the paper. We're going to have to come to a point where that can support us, because that's where we're heading. Someone has to figure out a way to make a mass audience interested in paying little bits of money for each of our stories.
And
some sort of bundling where that takes place.
so we talk about music, which is important, I think, to culture. It's important to me. It's probably important to a lot of you. We talked about social expression, greeting cards, and that's important. And how important are newspapers to our democracy? I mean, it's just, And you read about this, and it occurs to me, you know, what will happen. Right now, we have, and we're going to talk to Ken about this in about 5 minutes. We have that can't make a living anymore in music, and some continue to do it anyway. But what happens when the New York Times, and one of my favorite things to do in the great reporting, what happens when a newspaper like the New York Times can't produce such a great product anymore? What happens to our democracy? The Plain Dealer, as we all know, has cut down on home delivery. We're going to have Bruce Winges here from the Akron Beacon Journal shortly, and he'll have a perspective on what's going on in the newspaper industry. Libraries were very, very important to the Founding Fathers. Thomas Jefferson started the Library of Congress. I don't know if he started it, but he was the first depositor. He deposited 9,000 of his books, and I can now hold all 9,000 in my phone. And libraries are so important and fundamental to our democracy, so that, you know, people can borrow books and media and look at them. Now, what's happening to libraries as digitization comes? Well, we have another guest, Erica Lazzaro, who is General Counsel of Overdrive. And Overdrive, one thing I can tell you, one benefit of practicing in the kind of law I do is that I learn about and get to work with some fantastic Cleveland companies like American Greetings. And Overdrive is a fantastic company, has about 200 employees. You probably may not have heard of them. But if you've ever borrowed a book or video or music through your local public library, and I don't care where you live in the world, that's Overdrive in the background. And if you've ever bought an ebook from many retailers, it is likely that Overdrive could be powering that sale. So what's really interesting to me, Erica, is the evolution of your company. We talked about threats and opportunities. You know, it may be argued, and we're going to talk to Ken about this, that the music industry may have fumbled an opportunity because it was so threatened by what Sean Fanning did in Napster. And Erica, you're a company that actually has seen an opportunity and provided a solution to libraries so that they remained relevant, because they may not even be relevant in this day and age, but they still are highly relevant. Can you tell us how that all happened?
Sure. So you're right that libraries are part of our stakeholders, they're our customers, and like Patty was saying, libraries are on a mission to remain relevant. Many of us don't even visit a physical branch, but libraries, through providing a digital content platform like Overdrive offers, can reach that next generation of library patrons who eventually turn into their tax base who are supporting library systems. But another part of our stakeholder groups are, at its core, intellectual property providers like publishers. So that's book publishers out of New York, as Mark said, it's video producers, it's some record labels, it's audiobooks, so spoken word material. So Overdrive was founded and at its heart is a distributor, and found ways to monetize that intellectual property through the evolution of the digital industry. So it started with diskettes and CD-ROMs and working primarily with tax and legal publishers who had multi-volume sets of GAAP accounting guides, and of course, you know, legal was just as copious. And the CEO of Overdrive started getting into personal computing just to automate, frankly, his own law practice. And through that made connections with tax and legal publishers and said, I think I have a way to make your content accessible to more people and not have to take up shelf space to do it. And from that digitized content, as I said, to some physical media, then when internet delivery became part of our ecosystem, it all transitioned to online. And through that, the relationships expanded to the publishers in New York for best-selling content, so New York Times bestsellers across categories. And although we were working with booksellers, as Mark alluded to, and online retailers like Barnes & Noble, there came a point where there was a .com burst, and there was an opportunity to expand to institutional customers, so that's schools and libraries. And through some may say, fate or whatever it is, a visit to a trade show, a library trade show called the American Library Association, connected the CEO of Overdrive with librarians from Cleveland Public Library, and the two worked on a platform that would serve as that market, so libraries and other institutions to help remain relevant to their patrons in this day and age. And from there, the customer list expanded to over 28,000 libraries around the world, and the catalog has grown to over 1 million titles. But at its heart, we're interested in finding ways to monetize content providers' materials in a way that they feel comfortable with, and within the bounds, of course, of the law, and that is a great business opportunity for them too.
So what's really terrific is, unlike, and I'm not bashing Kodak, I don't know that much about their model. I just know they've been struggling to evolve. I mean, we have a great company in American Greetings, we have a great company in Overdrive, still grappling with digitization, but responding to it in ways where they're still profitable companies and seizing new opportunities, because there are new opportunities. And what I'm hearing is, what I heard from Patty was, we have good content. It's about what we produce, it's our content. And Erica mentioned content as well. Content is very important, the content she gets from her publisher partners and record company partners. I now want to spend some time, because we're going to speak with Glenn and Patty and Erica, with Professor Koo as he continues this discussion in a bit. But now I want to introduce Ken Antonelli, because we're going to start with the music industry and drill down a bit on the music industry. I don't know where we're going to do this, but I guess we can sit down, or we can just stand here, right? Or you want to just come on up there?
Do you want me to play this?
Oh yes, let's play this first, because this is kind of interesting. This is a little off color, but I hope you can hear it.
Dude, awesome shit.
Thanks very much.
So, how much for your CD?
It's $6.
Dude, $6? Bro, come on.
Dude, it's $6.
Bro, Radiohead gave their album away for free.
Do I look like fucking Radiohead to you?
Okay, calm down. Here's your $6. Jesus. Hey, I got a buddy who'd be into this. Do you mind if I burn him a copy?
Kinda.
Seriously?
Yeah, but what am I gonna do about it?
That's right, what are you gonna do about it?
I mean, I'd rather that anyone that wants to listen to it get a copy, but...
For what?
I mean, okay, it cost me $3 to burn the CD and print out a label and put it in the case. And then, I wrote the songs, played all the instruments, and recorded the music, and spent many a Saturday night hunched over my laptop, getting the EQ on the ukulele just right, instead of having sex with my fiance, so I figured that's worth about $3 too.
But Chris Anderson and Wired said the future of music is free, and you can make a living by touring and giving away your music online.
Chris Anderson can bite my tiny, tattooed, half-jap ass. You tell Chris Anderson to give his books away for free and make his money playing in shitty clubs in Provo, Utah, where the $4 cover goes straight to the bar, and the only way to make gas money to the next town is if some drunk picks up a copy of the CD.
Hang on, it says Creative Commons on the back. So, doesn't that mean I can give this away for free?
No, you're awfully well informed for a drunk frat guy in a bar.
I was a hipster my freshman year of college.
Yeah.
Okay, but what about this recent article by Kevin Kelly and Corey Doctorow about Boing Boing said for artists to make a living in the
Look, just take it, take it. Don't worry about it, just take it. I hope you like it. Burn copies for your friends, put it up on BitTorrent. It's fine. It's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And you out there on the internet, you want a CD? You email me. Email I don't have $6 at gmail.com with the subject line, Chris Anderson said you'd give me free shit, and I'll send you the goddamn CD.
It is just not very good.
That's entirely possible and probably more likely. Do you want the CD or not?
No, I'll just download it later. Thanks a lot.
Oh my god, that was so funny. I totally saw you last year in Salt Lake City, and I totally bought your CD. Oh, thanks. Thanks very much. Is this the new one? Yeah, it's $6. Cool, thanks. My cousin's one I like too. My friends just loved it.
All right, so I think that's really good. That gets at the nub of the problem. Ken, can you come up here? And we're going to talk about that video a little bit. And
Welcome to my world.
yes. So Ken, I think bio stuff is in the materials, but let me just give you a brief synopsis of Ken. So Ken's an old friend, colleague. He has had a robust career in the music industry. We're not going to go through everything. He was with Arista Records and EMI Records, and eventually became president of Red Distribution in New York, which was Sony's distribution arm, and he distributed records from Sony and many independent record labels, and had the who's who of you would know many of the artists that his records distributed. And of course he was in the business before 1997, 1998, before digitization happened, before Sean Fanning happened, before this happened. And he's been in the business since then, and he's now got, we didn't talk about this last night, but you have a company, Total Entertainment Asset Management, right, team? And so Ken also has a perspective about marketing music. We can put this down now. In the digital age. So you saw this, I thought was pretty clever. And it spoke to me because that's all I hear now. That's what we read. And I don't know, Professor Koo, if you've read this kind of thing or heard, now you just make money on the road and you don't have to really sell your stuff. And besides the fact that we just won't have high quality production if we don't have an incentive, for authors to be able to monetize their work. The fact of the matter is that a guy like this is not going to make any money on the road. He just isn't. And most musicians don't. So how the heck do you break new music? And we talked about, you have a theory of the middle ground. We're talking about content. Yeah. So go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to just make one sort of little anecdotal comment on, Patty's little talk there about, copyrights and publishing and stuff. And the reason why the copyrights are so expensive is because the business, as a global business, probably around 1996 or 97 was roughly $40 billion. And since then, fast forward now, it's roughly half of that. And in the United States, about $6 billion, give or take, one hit record or not. And that encompasses all revenue, and it's not just, from what people perceive as only the sale of a CD. And so the reason the copyrights are so expensive is because somewhere along the line, the publishing companies, which are generally owned by the larger record companies, EMI Publishing, Warner Chappell, Almo Irving, all those different companies, they have to make up the revenue somewhere. And so, and a lot of times the artists own the most sought after copyrights, and so they have decreased revenues that they're dealing with. And now you can't go on the road, 24, 12 months out of the year all the time. So somewhere along the line, that revenue has to surface somewhere, and that's why it's incredibly expensive if you can get them at all. In the case of the Beatles, that would be almost, you would never be able to do that ever, unless Yoko decided she wanted to do something, which she has. The second thing about, in sort of the middle ground of the publishing, for people that are not, major publishers, the people that own, catalogs that they have bought over the years and still maintain them, because that's generally their only source of revenue at the moment. What will happen, it was a comment that you made too about someone, who copied or took a sample of one of your songs, and it didn't really bother you because it was good exposure. But the way that works...
Well, it wasn't exposure, it just didn't bother me.
Well, it didn't bother you, right. Yeah. But I would...
He made more money off it than I did, probably, but he mixed it with 99 other things, so maybe not.
Yeah, I would suggest, because those are extreme examples. Girl Talk and, with Jay-Z are extreme examples. But in the middle of that, if you own a publishing company, a lot of times what happens is that people will take samples. Any artist will take samples from those copyrights. And the people that own them won't do anything because it isn't worth their time unless it becomes a much bigger revenue generating proposition, in which case the person who owns the copyright has far more leverage to get more for his license at that point to settle than he does if someone came to him and said, you know, I just want to license this one track. So they'll sit back and wait to see what happens. Because if it's not worth their time, they won't do it.
So what, in your opinion, and you may not have an opinion, it's an unfair question, because we've not even discussed anything like this, but why do you think Girl Talk's never been sued by the record labels?
Because the revenue that he's generating is mostly coming from his live experience. It's not like he's selling, you know, a lot of stuff online. People want to go see him play. And so it's very difficult to, you know, to stop him or to attach that revenue that he generates from his personal appearances, although they could.
Well, what I was told, I asked a senior legal guy at Sony this, and he said the reason nobody's doing it is because, you know, and he's not referring to Sony necessarily since this is being recorded, but, you know, generally rap artists and artists like this, they're sampling from everybody. They can't police their own artists. Everybody, you know, you can't throw stones if you live in a glass house. And, you know, I can tell you myself, I mean, I still go in the studio once in a while, and I work with somebody who didn't even know. I mean, we're sampling from ourselves now. You don't even know. You have an engineer who likes a particular kick drum, and he got it from, you know, somebody else's record. You don't even know it. He morphs it up. He forgot he even did it. He's got it in his library. He's mixing somebody else's record, and he puts the kick drum in there. You know, it's just pervasive.
Yeah, it's very difficult to, although, excuse me, in my own particular case, I started out as a musician, but since you didn't see me as the fifth Beatle up there, obviously I didn't quite make that leap. But I still play in a band, you know, with a bunch of guys that we've, you know, been playing together for 40 years.
Right.
And we just recently went to a studio last year and we're just having fun. It's nothing. And so we recorded a couple of old songs that we liked, and one of the guys put them up on YouTube, and it was just mostly to pass around families and friends. And about 2 weeks after that happened, one of the videos had about 100 plays, and it's all just friends and family. That's all it is. He got a call from Harry Fox saying we don't have a mechanical license, and so, you know, we owe them royalties. And I think, wow,
Yeah.
maybe there's hope.
So, all right, now something that I don't want to, it's easy to, when you watch that little video we just saw, it's very clever, you did a very good job on that. It's easy to say, oh yes, it's just terrible, now musicians can't make money. But hypothetically, I've never listened to this guy Scott's material, so maybe he's very good. But maybe he's not, right? And maybe the fact of the matter is that everybody shouldn't be a success, everybody shouldn't be money. Now, we talked about content. I talked to you last night. I have a feeling you still think content can drive this.
Well, content is always and always will continue to be king. You know, it will definitely be king. But having said that, it's amazing content that rules the day. There's no room, literally, for someone who's starting out that's just good. And there are tons of people that are good. I was recently had mentioned to Mark at one of the international music conferences, which is held in the south of France every year, and I went 15 or 16 years in a row there. And one of the presentations this year involved someone who has been at a very high level in the music industry for a long, long time, incredibly successful person, and left his job and started his own independent company, which will be distributed through a larger company. But his comments about where he's at, coming from that perspective and living in that world, and that's a different world than living on the independent side of it, which I'll get to. But his comment was, listen, I have two criteria, you know, for anything that comes across my desk. It has to be absolutely amazing, or it has to be really bad, because I can make a decision on that. But if it's in the middle, and if it's just good, or even if it's really good, it's a distraction, it's expensive, and that's not the way my company is geared for. If I'm going to do the more traditional things of radio promotion, marketing, publicity, touring, et cetera, licensing, you know, I have to think about where that niche is for me. And if it's amazing, that's my niche, and I can do that. But if it's in the middle, I can't do that. Okay, so now when you go back as an independent, And you say, well, okay, there's all this digitization, there's all this social media, you know, how do I utilize that? You know, maybe I'm not amazing, so how do I utilize that? And where does that, you know, kind of put me in the scope of, well, the trade-off is that you still have to be amazing. How many of us go to a wedding, right? And do you see a live band? 90% of the time, no. You see a DJ. You go to a restaurant, you go to a club, you see a guy with the computer there and he's playing stuff and he's actually pretty good, but he's not amazing. And so the trade-off is that if you want to go down that road, you better be really, really good as a musician. You have to play, you have to, you know, start, you know, many people, some of the greatest musicians in the world started in, you know, high school bands or elementary school bands. And they became just really, really great at music and reading music and playing it. And so the process of now of being good means that you can actually get instructions how to play any instrument online. Okay, and you can do that, and it's actually relatively simple to do that. Okay, so you can actually play, and now you can actually get a piece of software anywhere. You can load it up on your computer. You know, you can almost make a master quality demo in your bedroom. So the next step is you build a website, okay, and you put it up, you know, somewhere online. Maybe you're lucky enough and you maybe you can make a video out of that song. You put it up on YouTube, and you put a buy button on all those things or links to, you know, I got my stuff on iTunes, I got my stuff on Amazon, I got, and I'm an artist now. Well, guess what? You're not an artist. You're just someone who knows how to use software and maybe play an instrument. That's not what an artist does. You have to be extraordinarily good. The statistics are not in your favor if you're just really good. Pick any industry, any, you know, sports. You can look at that as sort of a metaphor. 1 in 60,000 athletes actually ever become professional athletes. You know, if you're on Broadway and you're a dancer, the odds are 1 in 15,000 that you'll actually ever even get a paying job on Broadway. So if you're just looking at the statistics to say, I'll just briefly quote a couple of them here. When I was on a very active part of the music industry, when I was involved in Red and many other companies that I worked for, the average was maybe in any given calendar year about 15,000 to 20,000 new releases would come out. Now the average is well over 100,000. So that's anything, you know, with a UPC code on it that comes out, not counting anything that you put up anywhere that doesn't have any of that. So now the latest statistics that are compiled in 2011, 8 million unique single tracks that totaled about 1.2 billion copies sold, sold less than, I would say, 6 million of those 8 million tracks sold less than 10 copies. So
the long tail percent.
The long tail, it never works because if the music is bad, it's not going to sell. I don't care how long your tail is, you know, it's just not going to sell.
So let me ask you this. So all right, you build a website, you make a record. Now I'm gonna, and then we're going to open up to any questions out there. But you build a website, it's democratized that process. Distribution, now you're not beholden to the 4 or 5 or 6 major labels, right?
Right.
You put it out. Here's my question now, and it dovetails into how you break new artists. When I was, you know, in my early 20s playing with bands, we had WMMS here, and if my record would get on WMMS, that was my goal, and if it would get on WDVE in Pittsburgh, and it was played at 5:15, I can tell you my entire relevant market. And when I was with Donnie Iris and the Cruisers, and they played Aaliyah at 5:15 on a Friday, when we played the Agora that night, it was packed because everybody heard it. That was a filter, and now you have an amazing person, amazing content, amazing song. He puts it up on YouTube. You know, what happens? Is there a filter? There's so fragmented, and we're going to talk about this in the news business as well.
Well, the process is still believe it or not, it's still the same. You know, there isn't that much that has actually changed with that. Even though you can utilize social media, it isn't going to be the vehicle that starts it. You know, because again, using those examples that you saw, those things happen almost on their own. You know, somebody saw something and it became a viral, you know, content, as well as, you know, what's the song? What Would the Fox Say?
Yeah.
And some of the other things that you've seen.
Call Me
Sigh,
Maybe.
Call Me Maybe.
Yeah.
Those were all because we don't live in that type of society. It's not a push it down your throat society. You're pulling it out because there's too much unfiltered stuff in the middle of it. One of the biggest problems, I've always felt, it's my own personal opinion, I'm sure many would disagree, but the advent of television, when it comes to music over the course of the last 10 or so years, American Idol, The Voice, whatever shows, you know, have become incredibly a huge diversion and did not, I think, really help the music industry per se. In fact, what it actually did was, if you saw the amount of people that actually ended up having careers, you could count them on one hand. And over the course of, you know, 10 or 12 years that those shows on that have had 20 or 30 million viewers at any given time during the course of a week, you would think that there would be, you know, 100, you know, artists that came out of that. But in fact, every single one of those artists that came in number 2 or number 10 have been dropped by every record company in existence. And so, but the result of that is, if you're sitting at home and you watch that, you say, you know, boy, I could do that, you know, I could do that. And so you have everybody that wants to do that, to think that that's going to be their gateway to do that. But the reality of it is, going back to it, if you're playing and you're really great at what you do, in your particular area that you live in, or where you come from, one of the great things about working with Red and running that company was we had a whole unique system of 40 or 50 different smaller companies that came from all over the world. Some came from overseas, that were their own A&R people in each one of those territories. So I didn't have to pay them, you know, I didn't have to put them on my payroll. They brought me the best music. They knew what was going on. Most of them were horrible business people, and part of what we did was to give them that, you know, financial ability and business acumen to get them to the next level. So now that you're here, and if you're in that game right now, a lot of those people have been squeezed out, because everybody watching television who thinks they're an artist, you know, you have hundreds of thousands of people that put stuff out every year that is just not that good.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, it's common in part to just lament, oh my God, you know, we don't, you know, poor musicians. I mean, a lot of them shouldn't be making records. Okay, I mean, it's the way. Can I open? Anybody have questions here?
Yeah, I have a question. When you were talking about Jay-Z a little while ago, oftentimes.
I'm sorry?
Jay-Z.
Jay-Z.
You know, one of the presenters said that when he collaborated with an artist, it kind of kickstarted his career. Well, the problem with that is he actually came out in '95. And by the time the Black Album came out, he was talking about retiring. So by the time people that are familiar with the music start hearing about it, they think, oh, he collaborated and that's what made him famous. But he didn't. And when it comes to sampling, it was just a little bit I had on that. I think sometimes sampling can benefit an artist that retires and it's no longer prevalent. Like my father-in-law is Jimmy Rutter. Not a lot of people know him.
I do.
Right. Now, if someone heard that beat come out, to what became of A Broken Hearted,
right,
then that would put him back. You know, and then it's like, okay, he can benefit from it financially, the artist who actually samples. So I think as long as it's a financial agreement, it's a good thing. You know.
Well, yeah, to be sure. I mean, Kid Rock sampled Skinner. I mean, that was a huge record, and it was definitely paid for, and it was probably a 50-50 joint venture, but it was a good thing for Skinner as well. I mean, it was like a hit record for them all over again. Any other questions? Yes.
I wonder about the gap between what is being sold and what is being consumed. And the sense I get is that the pattern of how music is being consumed doesn't necessarily match with what people are trying to sell into the market. So, for example, people, you know, the music industry, well, the either on an album or a song to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at what people are actually doing when they are consuming music, my apologies. It's not clear that.
We don't care, Tom, we just like to see.
It's not clear. It's not clear that that's what they're doing, that they are consuming it on a per unit basis, album or song, that they are doing so in a way that puts that piece of music, that they want to own it, they want to hold it in any such fashion. There seems to be something different happening here. There's the because there's the participation part, right? They want to sing the music. They want to put their little performance up on YouTube. They want to listen to a whole category of music over maybe a week. They're into Sephardic, music for that week. They want to listen to all these different versions of it during that time.
Mm-hmm.
They want to listen to their 80s, nostalgia album for maybe a couple of months. And so there is some transformation happening there, but there still seems to be a real gap in what the companies are trying to deliver and what is actually happening on the consumption side.
So what about the difference between ownership and a stream?
Well,
Because he's speaking to that.
Yeah.
Lessons yesterday said, Lessons, if you want to read, if any of you are interested in this, subscribe to the Lessons letter. I'm not telling you to do it, I'm not saying you're always going to enjoy it, but the Lessons letter, Google it, and everybody reads it in the industry.
Yeah, well, the issue, to your comment and question, the issue is that everybody's doing it for free. And that's what most of the companies are sort of trying to figure out. If you live in the universe of Universal or Sony or Warner Brothers, 35% of their sales are still come from traditional CDs, and that margin there, in terms of how they make money, is critical. And when you're looking at a global business, because most of the time, you're looking at it from where you live, in the United States, but you're looking at it globally. Adele, as an extreme example, sold over 20 million physical CDs over the course of the lifespan of that record, and so they made an enormous amount of money from that. So, having said that, the ones that don't do that, so now if you're an artist there, most of the time you don't get to have a full album deal anymore. You have you get a singles deal. Maybe it's one side or two sides that you cut, and then if it does something, maybe you'll get to record a full album, at some point in time. However, if you're going to do that, though, again, because, as I mentioned before, the significance of the drop in overall revenue in the business, you're going to give up every right that you have, your publishing rights, your merchandising rights, your licensing rights, your touring rights, anything that you do that they're investing, because the average new artist at a major record company costs them well over $1 million, which is essentially an interest-free loan. If it doesn't sell and they invest $1 million in you, it's not like someone's coming to your door and saying, hey, you gotta pay me back. It's just gone. So in order for someone to make that decision to spend $1 million on it, they're gonna acquire, a dozen different rights, in everything that they do. So going back to the consumer, he's looking for it to pay, to pay zero. So how do you capture that, that gap that's there, we were talking about, streaming as a potential, for growth in the business, and recently Beats Music came out with their own version of their streaming, which is a bundled service on AT&T, which is an additional $15 a month, I think, for them, but you have to pay for it, as opposed to Spotify or Pandora, which are essentially free, with add-on premiums to get rid of the advertising for an extra $5 or $10 or whatever the tariff is there. But that doesn't necessarily mean anybody's going to do that. Because in order for the growth to happen, it can't be just a handful of people that have money that can afford to pay $15 or $5. The average person has a tough time these days, economically speaking, to come up with $5. So I'm listening for free. I don't care. I'll listen to the ads. It's free. I don't have to do that right now. So there's the grab in terms of the artist if you're in that particular situation. If you're an independent person, the trade-off is that you get to keep all the rights. In the company that I currently have, it's a consulting company that we're not a rights holder. We just give you a specific service at a specific time of when you particularly need it, so that you're not paying for the overhead. There's no office that I go to, there's
So
no.
you license?
We don't license, we do not license. All of the money goes to the artist.
Okay.
Every penny. It's the only thing,
So how do you make commission?
it's strictly a commission. There's no office, there's none of that. You know, when you go around and try to start a business like that, you're asking someone, you know, I spent a year and a half after I left Sony with a very own group of executives trying to raise money through private equity and hedge funds and investment banking companies for a year and a half, trying to raise enough money to start yet another independent, you know, / major company. And none of them would give you a penny. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to them. You know, even if you borrowed $100 or $200 million, it wouldn't be worth it to do it to them. They're interested in 200 billion maybe, but not 100 million. So you can't do that because all the money goes to overhead, and the return is very difficult to sustain. So our company doesn't do that. It's just basically strictly commission, and when you have something like that, you're not paying for rent, you're not paying for anything, you're paying for the service that you need. But I'm not here to sell the company. That's just one way of doing it.
So I'm going to get to your question in a second. But first, I'm going to end up with you. Can the students raise their hand again? Because I'm curious. I'm not going to ask you if you've ever downloaded something illegally. Because I know you have. How do you experience music? Spotify. Premium or free?
I used to use premium, but it doesn't ever work on my phone, so I went back to
How about you?
I use Spotify for free, or with my
Right.
How many use Spotify to experience music? How many?
Pay for it.
I actually do it myself. I pay for it, premium. How many buy stuff from iTunes?
Or Amazon.
Or Amazon, right? You know. Yeah. So how many buy physical CDs? I do too. Okay. And how many have borrowed media from a public library? Very good.
Right.
That's good. We're all there in discussion.
When you borrow a CD from a public library, you download it on your computer or whatever. I watch my niece do this. I'd have her do it for me. But are you violating? I'm sorry. Are you violating the copy law?
Well, we'll let Erica, I think, answer this. But are you talking about going to the library, taking a physical CD? Well, okay. All right, I can answer that. I'll leave you out of this. So when your niece borrows a physical CD from the library, can I get her name, please? No. There's something called the audio home recording. Okay, and if you buy a CD legally, and and you copy it to a tape recorder at home, that's okay, because there's actually a tax built into certain audio devices. Now, and maybe Professor Koo knows, I'm not aware of any case yet that has interpreted whether uploading into your iTunes library is a violation of copyright law, but I would strongly suggest that it would fall under the purview of this Audio Home Recording Act, and so I don't think that's really problematic. Now, technically though, in the bundle of rights, 17 U.S.C. 106, one of those rights is reproduction, copying, and that's what she's doing. So, I'm a lawyer, so I'm going to give you a good answer, and the lawyers always say, we're really not sure, So, but I wouldn't lose sleep over it, okay? I wouldn't lose sleep over it.
I'm not losing sleep. I just wondered.
The better way to do it is, see, if you go through the Cleveland Public Library, you just borrow the media that's overdrive in the background, then, she can borrow that media and listen to it, and,
Push it through the back, right? You shouldn't get it forever.
yeah, well, you're borrowing. Yeah. All right, well, we'll put that on the shelf. It speaks to what's going on these days, and what was your question?
So I'm just wondering, if I listen to a mashup between like Jay-Z and the Beatles or Girl Talk, how that would ever prevent me from like listening to the original because it's being sampled in a mashup, and how that would function as a substitute for the original.
And that's an element of fair use. We have 4 factors in fair use, which is, One is, the first factor is it commercial use or non-commercial? Is it transformative? Assuming it is transformative, it drives factor 4.
If anything,
will it replace, will it satiate your need to hear the original Glass Onion or whatever by the Beatles?
it might make me more interested in the original, right?
I agree with you. So that's a good argument for fair use. So if you're defending Greg Gillis, are you a law student here?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you may get out, you're a copyright lawyer, and you may have to defend Greg Gillis, and that's certainly an argument that you would make.
But I mean, the whole premise here seems to be that the record industry business model should be protected because it's good. Like you were getting at in answering the last question, you know, there's a market here where you can get the music for free, and then there's the price that the industry sets. And you know, you can't go back to the 90s and ignore all the technology that exists. I mean, a lot of like Netflix, for example, monitors illegal downloads to know what's popular. And there's been many studies that show that, you know, illegal downloads then boost legal downloads. It seems like a premise is that when you're downloading something, you're directly substituting buying that CD or whatever it is, when, you know, maybe you're just downloading it to be curious, and then, you know, if it's good stuff, it'll spread by word of mouth.
I mean, what you're suggesting is that just because you download something doesn't mean you would have purchased it anyway.
Right, and just because you're downloading it for free doesn't mean you're hurting the industry or the artist.
What do you think?
No, I wouldn't argue that. You know, it doesn't mean that at all. The question is just whether or not, you know, if you're an artist, you know, what are your choices, and how do you know, find a pathway? You know, certainly not suggesting, you know, that anybody go back to the 90s. Although I would, you know, would argue the point that given the nature of the people that run these companies today, the essence of the creative aspects of it have long gone, and you know, the aspect of too much money and too much financial pressure and economics and a host of other reasons that have stifled that. And so the trade-offs are, you know, what are your choices? So if that's one way for you to do it, you better be incredible, you know, as an artist. And the other way, you know, you can surface and utilize all of the digital technology and the social media and every other aspect that you can, but you still have to be amazing. But you're going to end up keeping all of those rights yourself, you know, and that's the trade-off. But the difference is that you're going to have to fund all those things yourself in some way, whether you do it, you know, as a Kickstarter, or you know, you have an angel investor in some way. You have your own money, whatever it is. But the aspects of doing it are not that much different. In terms of how you're marketing, you certainly add all the social media functions in it, but that's kind of those are your choices. And I'm not suggesting that, you know, people don't do that. You know, an answer, I guess, in sort of a roundabout way to your question, I don't see that as being, you know, a major issue. And in a lot of cases, it's helpful.
Okay, well, you know, I'm just saying, you know, maybe the business model should shift more towards like convenience for the user, like you pay $10 a month for Netflix or whatever, and then you can watch whatever movie, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's more convenient than finding it and streaming it or downloading it. You know, like you were saying with production, you can make high quality production yourself, and you can distribute it, you know, on YouTube or on the Pirate Bay or whatever. So that seems to me like traditionally the major, you know, advantage of the record was the distribution and production aspects. You know, now that's being cut down. You know, it seems like maybe the business model in the future should just be like, you know, if you pay $10 a month or, you know, some kind of fee, and then you have access to all the artists on that record label to download, you know.
I've actually read it, and that makes a lot of sense, because I mean, it's sort of like water, right? We all pay for water, and if you want just ordinary tap water, you know, and you want to download from LimeWire or whatever and expose yourself to all the germs that could be in that water, I guess you could do it. You could meter the house, and you pay $5 a month for that tap water. But if you want Aquafina, or if you want, you know, Perrier, you're gonna pay for that user experience, and that's what you're suggesting.
I like Perrier.
Yes, okay.
But just to add one thing, it doesn't mean it's any good. You know, doesn't mean it's any good. You know, at the end of the day, you know, you could make a tape. You could make a tape, but it can be master quality. It doesn't mean that it's any good. Doesn't mean the production is any good. It just means you can do it. That's what it means.
Mary Beth, are we supposed to take a break soon, or are we past it? At 10:15. 10:15, okay. Question over here?
How often does the industry go after individuals who have downloaded improperly, or, I mean, I had a lot of friends who were posting on Facebook, ooh, you can watch Frozen, and my generation were kids movies right now, and that was a huge hit, and then several of my friends like, oh, it worked. And do people ever go after, people who actually do those sort of things? And
yeah, there have been various cases, and you know, it's been a the friction point is between the service provider and the company itself, you know, because the service providers don't want to necessarily invade on people's privacy, and they don't want to, you know, violate any of their own agreements that they have with their customers. And so you have to get somebody from a legal standpoint to give you the information. Okay, who are these people that are just downloading, you know, thousands and thousands of pieces of music, you know, in a month, let's say. And they have been able to go after them. In some of those cases, even though it's been, you know, Napster was, you know, in the late 90s, in 99, I think, some of those cases are still going on.
So Jamie Thomas was a mother in, I believe she was in Minnesota, I'm not sure, and she was downloading stuff, allegedly, and she got liability ensued. There was a lawsuit. The RIAA sued her, and there's something called statutory damages in the Copyright Act. And so she got nailed with a huge judgment, and the judge reduced it a bit, but she still got nailed with a huge judgment, like, I don't know, a couple $100,000 or something like that. And the RIAA, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but you know, that was one of their responses to what was going on, was suing their customers to try to get it stopped. But as everybody's alluding to here, you know, you can either, you know, on a Saturday morning when it's 5 degrees out, put on your coat, warm up your car, and drive down to the nearest Walmart to get some CD you want, to find out that they only carry like 5 CDs and they don't carry the CD you want. Or you could stay home in your pajamas and download it for free. It's really tough to poke a hole in that model, you know.
And the music companies at one point too, when that first started to occur, you know, to try to suppress, you know, P2P, all had meetings with all of the internet providers and the phone companies, and tried to force them to, you know, provide that, you know, direct information. And every single one of the companies were shut down because they don't want to do it. You know, and it's a violation of their other privacy. It's like, if you guys are losing customers, you should get with the technology, get with it. You know, I'm not jeopardizing my customer base from the phone companies or internet providers because you guys, you know, can't seem to figure out how to make this work. So they stopped doing it.
One more question, and then we're going to take a coffee break. And then you'll have an opportunity later.
How actively are recording companies, movies, and also music pursuing the customers, not the line wires of the world?
I'm sorry, say that.
How often are they suing customers?
How active are they now? These are older cases.
Hardly at all.
Yeah,
you know,
it's
if
sort
not.
of falling off. They're realizing it's like whacking them all.
Right.
Just, yeah,
right.
It's just going to come out. Yeah. And it was a good PR. So, all right, we're right on schedule. How about that? So we're going to take a little coffee break, and we're going to then focus on newspapers, a little drilling down.